It was a cold, gray morning in London when whispers began to ripple through the palace corridors. Whispers that would soon ignite a storm unlike anything the royal family had faced in decades. The usual hum of activity, the orderly rhythm of courtiers and advisors, seemed heavier that day, as if the walls themselves held their breath. Behind the gilded doors of Buckingham Palace, Prince William sat in silence, his eyes fixed on a letter that had arrived only hours before. The contents of that letter were incendiary, a revelation so shocking that it seemed almost impossible, yet the handwriting, the official seals, and the corroborating intelligence left him with no choice but to confront a painful truth. For 30 years, a veil had been lifted, exposing hidden intentions, secret manipulations, and a betrayal that cut far deeper than anyone outside those walls could imagine. At the center of this storm was Camilla, once quietly navigating the background of royal life, now revealed as the architect of a plan that threatened the innocence of his daughter, Princess Charlotte. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Charlotte, barely 9 years old, had always been the light of William's life. From her first steps on the palace grounds to her shy ways to the public at grand events, she had captured hearts with her intelligence, wit, and charm. But the very light he cherished seemed to be endangered by someone who, for years, had positioned herself as a trusted member of the family. Camilla, the queen consort, whose influence was subtle yet far-reaching, had allegedly been maneuvering behind the scenes to place Charlotte in a situation that William considered dangerous and wholly unacceptable. The name Gus Lopez had surfaced in private memos and intelligence briefings, a young man whose family connections and ambitions intertwined unervingly with the royal inner circle. To William, the prospect of his daughter being forced into proximity, or worse, into a relationship orchestrated by someone she trusted, was intolerable. The morning began with a sense of disorientation for William. His aides moved quickly, papers rustling, the quiet urgency of whispered conversations bouncing off the ornate walls. But none of the usual protocols mattered now. This was not a matter of public appearances, charity events, or political diplomacy. This was personal, familial, and dangerous. William's mind raced as he pieced together the information that had come to light. It was not a single act, a simple oversight, or a misunderstanding. It was a deliberate, calculated plan. Camilla had leveraged her position, cultivated alliances within the palace, and used her influence to guide Charlotte toward a future that William could not abide. Each detail of the revelation stung. Each confirmation of the plan amplified the sense of urgency. As the day unfolded, William moved with a determined precision, summoning those closest to him for emergency consultations. Advisors, security officials, and trusted confidants were gathered in a secluded wing of the palace, far from the prying eyes of the press and the public. The room, filled with tense whispers and measured voices, became the crucible in which the decision would be forged. William spoke little, his gaze intense, scanning each face for understanding and resolve. The gravity of what had been uncovered demanded action, but the action he contemplated would not be simple. Stripping a queen consort of her title was unprecedented, a move that would shake the monarchy to its foundations and invite scrutiny from every corner of the world. Yet the stakes were clear: protect his daughter, safeguard her agency, and assert that familial loyalty and protection outweighed protocol or tradition. In the midst of these deliberations, the atmosphere in the palace became charged with a mixture of anticipation and fear. Courtiers speculated quietly among themselves, the echoes of past scandals and historic decisions reverberating through the ornate halls. Few had ever witnessed William in such a state, his measured calm now tinged with the intensity of a man confronting a betrayal at the heart of his family. He revisited the evidence meticulously: letters, intercepted communications, testimonies from aides and staff who had observed the subtle manipulations, all pointing to the same uncomfortable conclusion. Camilla had overstepped, using her position to impose her will upon Charlotte, with intentions that were still, in some ways, opaque but unquestionably concerning. As he pieced together the broader picture, William's mind was drawn back to his own childhood, the lessons imparted by his parents, and the values he sought to instill in his children. The monarchy was not merely a symbol, It was a structure of responsibility, ethics, and accountability. Yet, within that structure, personal ambition had begun to blur the lines, and the consequences were now tangible. Charlotte, a young girl with her own thoughts, desires, and innocence, was at risk of being swept into a web of manipulation she could not understand. The thought of that, the idea of her future being dictated by someone whose motivations were suspect, ignited in William a resolve that would not allow compromise. By midday, the first waves of confrontation began. Private meetings were scheduled, discreet calls made, and messages sent to key allies who could influence the outcome. William understood that action needed to be swift yet calculated. Any hesitation could provide Camilla the leverage to obscure her actions further or manipulate the narrative in her favor. The weight of the monarchy, the expectations of public perception, and the undeniable truth of the familial betrayal converged into a singular clarity. He would act decisively and unequivocally. Meanwhile, Charlotte, unaware of the brewing storm, moved through her day with a sense of normalcy that belied the tension simmering just beyond her awareness. In a study filled with sunlight, she practiced her lessons, unaware that the protection her father would soon assert was being meticulously orchestrated behind palace doors. For William, every decision was measured against the backdrop of his daughter's well-being. The abstract principles of duty, tradition, and protocol mattered little in comparison to the tangible need to shield her from manipulation and undue influence. Even as discussions intensified within the palace, the specter of public reaction loomed. The press, trained to detect even the subtlest of shifts in royal behavior, would undoubtedly sense the tension, yet William's immediate priority was not public opinion. His calculations were singularly focused on rectifying a wrong, reclaiming agency for his daughter, and sending an unmistakable message. No one, not even a queen consort, could jeopardize the safety, autonomy, or future of a royal child under his protection. As the afternoon wore on, the evidence was reviewed again, statements corroborated, and contingencies considered. Advisors debated potential outcomes, from public backlash to the diplomatic consequences. Yet the moral clarity of William's position remained unwavering. This was not a matter of pride or protocol. It was a matter of protecting the next generation, ensuring that the decisions of those in power respected the innocence and rights of the young, and asserting that accountability extended to everyone, regardless of rank or title. By evening, a plan began to crystallize, both in terms of immediate action and long-term consequences. William would confront Camilla directly, unambiguously, and then implement measures that would safeguard Charlotte, while reasserting his authority within the family structure. The decision to strip Camilla of her queen consort title was no longer hypothetical, it was imminent. Yet even in this moment of clarity, the weight of history pressed upon him. Few had ever challenged the monarchy in such a profound, personal way, and the precedent set by his actions would be remembered for generations. As the day drew to a close, the palace seemed to exhale with tension, aware that a moment of reckoning had arrived. The corridors, usually filled with routine and order, now carried the weight of impending confrontation, each footstep echoing the gravity of decisions yet to be made. William, seated once more with the documents before him, allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. This was not a choice made lightly. It was born from necessity, courage, and the unyielding responsibility of a father. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reverberate far beyond the gilded walls of Buckingham Palace. Secrets long kept in the shadows were emerging into the light. The innocence of a young princess was at stake, and the authority of the monarchy itself would be tested in unprecedented ways. In the hours to come, decisions would be made, loyalties tested, and the balance of power within the royal family irrevocably altered. For Prince William, the path forward was clear, though fraught with danger, emotion, and historical significance. His actions would define not only the immediate future of Princess Charlotte, but the moral compass of the monarchy itself. The corridors of Buckingham Palace had always been a stage of subtle maneuvering, a world where whispers carried more weight than speeches, and where loyalty and ambition coexisted in a delicate, often dangerous balance. For centuries, the monarchy had relied on tradition, protocol, and the careful orchestration of appearances to maintain both stability and reverence. Yet beneath the glittering chandeliers and polished floors, power was a game, one that required foresight, discretion, and, occasionally, ruthless decisiveness. On this particular morning, Prince William found himself at the center of that game, confronting a crisis that was both deeply personal and undeniably political. The revelations regarding Camilla's actions and her intentions for Princess Charlotte had exposed cracks in the palace's equilibrium that could no longer be ignored. William had spent weeks, though in reality it felt like months compressed into frantic hours, reviewing documents, letters, and intelligence reports that detailed Camilla's interventions. From subtle attempts to guide Charlotte's social interactions to the more alarming notion that Gus Lopez was being strategically introduced into her life, the pattern was unmistakable. Each layer of influence seemed carefully calculated, as if to orchestrate a scenario in which Charlotte's choices were gently manipulated to align with Camilla's ambitions. The thought of someone, even a member of the family, engineering such a situation for a child who had done nothing but bring joy and pride to her family ignited a sense of righteous anger in William. He understood the weight of royal duty, but he also knew the paramount importance of protecting his daughter from manipulation, no matter the cost. The tension between personal loyalty and institutional duty had always been a defining feature of William's role. As the eldest son, he carried not only the expectations of the public, but also the legacy of his parents. Their memory, their values, and the lessons they imparted during his upbringing were now guiding him as he faced one of the most difficult decisions of his life. His father, the king, had long navigated the treacherous waters of palace intrigue, yet William now recognized that some battles required a clarity and decisiveness that could not be deferred. The stakes were no longer theoretical or distant. They were immediate and pressing, with real consequences for the future of the monarchy and the well-being of the young princess at its heart. In a private study lined with shelves of carefully curated books, William convened his most trusted advisors. Security officials, palace aides, and legal counsel assembled in a room charged with urgency and an undercurrent of fear. No one spoke lightly. Every word was measured, every gesture calculated. The room was filled with the quiet hum of anticipation, punctuated by the soft rustle of documents and the occasional cough. William, standing at the head of the table, radiated a calm intensity that demanded attention and respect. He spoke first, his voice steady but carrying the weight of his resolve. He outlined the evidence, each point carefully corroborated by witnesses, intercepted communications, and first-hand accounts. The narrative was undeniable. Camilla had acted with deliberate intent, leveraging her authority and relationships within the palace to shape a course for Charlotte that was at best misguided and at worst dangerous. The advisors listened in tense silence, absorbing the implications of William's assessment. Some leaned forward, whispering concerns about the ramifications of confronting a queen consort in such a direct manner. Public perception, diplomatic fallout, and the potential destabilization of the monarchy were valid concerns. Yet William's position was uncompromising. The protection of his daughter and the moral integrity of the family superseded all other considerations. His eyes, sharp and unwavering, scanned the faces around the table, ensuring that his message was understood. This was not a matter for debate. It was a matter for action. The question that had dominated William's thoughts was how to proceed without undermining the very institution he was sworn to uphold. Stripping a queen consort of her title was a move that carried historical weight and the potential to send shockwaves throughout the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth. It was a decision that could redefine perceptions of royal authority, challenge centuries of tradition, and invite scrutiny from the press and public alike. Yet, despite these considerations, William's resolve remained firm. He recognized that inaction would signal weakness, tacit approval of manipulation, and a dangerous precedent for future generations. The monarchy, he understood, was not merely a symbol of continuity. It was a structure built on accountability, responsibility, and the protection of those within its care. As plans began to take shape, William's mind returned to the more human dimensions of the conflict. He thought of Charlotte, her laughter echoing through the palace corridors during family gatherings, the sparkle of curiosity in her eyes, and the gentle way she approached the world. She was a child with agency, intelligence, and the capacity to understand right from wrong, yet she remained vulnerable in ways that only a parent could fully appreciate. The notion that someone might attempt to coerce or influence her without her knowledge, under the guise of familial guidance, was intolerable. Protecting her innocence, ensuring her autonomy, and preserving her trust became the guiding principles for every decision William would make in the hours and days to come. The story of the royal power struggle was not solely about family dynamics. It was also about the intricate machinery of influence that had evolved over decades within the palace walls. Camilla, with her years of experience and keen understanding of courtly politics, had honed the ability to maneuver subtly, often undetected. Her alliances, cultivated quietly over time, were now illuminated in stark relief against the backdrop of William's intervention. What had previously been whispers in shadowed corridors had emerged as an undeniable pattern of manipulation. Each encounter, each suggestion, each seemingly innocuous action had been part of a larger design, one that William now recognized with chilling clarity. Strategically, William had to anticipate not only Camilla's immediate responses, but also the ripple effects across the monarchy, the media, and the global public. The palace's communication channels, long accustomed to managing crises discreetly, would now be put to the test. Every statement, every gesture, and every interaction would be scrutinized, interpreted, and potentially misrepresented. William understood that to maintain control over the narrative, the actions he took would need to be precise, measured, and authoritative. The goal was not merely to confront Camilla but to assert a principle. The protection of family and the ethical exercise of power must prevail over personal ambition and manipulation. The weight of history was palpable in the moments leading up to the confrontation. Decisions made within these walls had long-reaching consequences, shaping not only the lives of those involved, but also the perception of the monarchy itself. William, mindful of this legacy, drew on the lessons of his parents and predecessors, blending pragmatism with moral clarity. The choice to act decisively was not born of anger alone. It was rooted in a deep understanding of responsibility, foresight, and the imperative to safeguard those who could not defend themselves. As evening approached, the palace seemed suspended in a tense stillness. The golden glow of the chandeliers cast long shadows across the marble floors, echoing the gravity of the decisions being contemplated. William, having reviewed every piece of evidence and anticipated every potential outcome, prepared for the confrontation that would define this chapter of royal history. His course of action was clear. Camilla would be held accountable, and Charlotte's safety and autonomy would be secured. The decision to strip a queen consort of her title was no longer theoretical. It was a necessary, deliberate act to assert moral authority, familial protection, and the unassailable principle that no ambition could override the well-being of a child. In that moment, William embodied the convergence of duty, love, and authority. The royal power struggle, once an abstract concept whispered about in corridors, had transformed into a tangible, decisive battle. The stakes were enormous, the outcomes unpredictable, yet the clarity of purpose guided every step. History would remember the actions taken, the courage displayed, and the unwavering commitment to family and principle. For Prince William, the message was unmistakable. The monarchy, while steeped in tradition, was ultimately accountable to the values it sought to uphold, and no one, not even a queen consort, was above that accountability. Princess Charlotte had always been the heart of the family, a beacon of innocence and intelligence that brought warmth to the corridors of the palace. Her life, though framed by privilege and public fascination, had been remarkably grounded, shaped by the careful guidance of her parents, William and Catherine. Yet even in such a sheltered environment, the complexities of royalty had begun to press upon her young shoulders. The unfolding situation with Camilla was one of the first instances where Charlotte truly confronted the interplay of influence, power, and expectation, an experience that would leave an indelible mark on her understanding of the world and her place within it. It had begun subtly, almost imperceptibly. Charlotte's days, once filled with playdates and school projects, had gradually been punctuated by invitations and interactions orchestrated by Camilla, often framed as opportunities for Charlotte to cultivate connections with peers or distant relatives. On the surface, these arrangements seemed benign, even generous. Camilla had a way of presenting her actions as thoughtful gestures, wrapped in the veneer of guidance and experience. Yet William, observant and protective, quickly discerned a pattern that suggested far more calculated motives. The introduction of Gus Lopez into Charlotte's social circle was particularly troubling. The boy, charming and polished, seemed an ideal candidate for influence. Yet William, observant and protective, quickly discerned a pattern that suggested far more calculated motives. The introduction of Gus Lopez into Charlotte's social circle was particularly troubling. The boy, charming and polished, seemed an ideal candidate for influence. Impressionable, socially adept, and positioned to serve as a conduit for Camilla's ambitions. Charlotte, perceptive yet innocent, initially welcomed the interactions with the warmth and curiosity typical of a child her age. She did not recognize the subtle strings being pulled, nor the implications of the carefully choreographed engagements. To her, these were simply new experiences, moments of social discovery that seemed both exciting and ordinary. It was only in hindsight, through the lens of her father's vigilance and the careful unpacking of Camilla's intentions, that the full significance became clear. Each meeting, each invitation, and each conversation had been carefully curated, designed to nudge Charlotte toward familiarity and, ultimately, compliance with a vision that was not her own. The emotional weight of this realization struck William with alarming clarity. His daughter's agency, her ability to navigate the world freely, was at stake. The idea that Charlotte might be subtly guided into decisions and interactions orchestrated by someone other than her parents was intolerable. The palace, with all its grandeur and protocol, could not serve as a shield against manipulation when that manipulation came from within the family. Protecting Charlotte became an immediate, non-negotiable priority, demanding careful planning, strategic foresight, and decisive action. As William began to intervene, the impact on Charlotte's daily life was palpable. She sensed a shift in the atmosphere, a heightened vigilance from her parents, and the subtle redirection of interactions that once flowed freely. Though she did not fully comprehend the dynamics at play, she could feel the undercurrent of tension, the weight of decisions being made on her behalf. Children, even those raised in the rarefied environment of royalty, possess an innate sense of awareness. Charlotte's curiosity and intelligence allowed her to notice inconsistencies, shifts in tone, and the occasional unnatural insistence that someone, somewhere, had designs upon her time and attention. The confrontation with Camilla, orchestrated by William behind closed doors, was designed not only to assert authority but also to safeguard Charlotte from further exposure to manipulation. The palace had always functioned on a delicate balance of visibility and discretion, and this situation required the full exercise of that balance. Every step was carefully considered. The timing of meetings, the choice of advisors present, and the framing of evidence were all aligned to ensure that Camilla's actions were addressed decisively, yet without creating unnecessary spectacle. William understood that the narrative of the confrontation would extend beyond the walls of the study. Whispers in the corridors, leaks to journalists, and speculation among the public were inevitable. Yet, the moral imperative outweighed the potential fallout. Charlotte's welfare, her autonomy, and her trust in her family were paramount. Within this intricate web, Charlotte's own perspective remained central. Her thoughts, feelings, and emotional responses were closely observed and respected by William and Catherine. They sought to shield her not merely from external influence, but also from the psychological strain of understanding the subtleties of familial politics at such a young age. Conversations were carefully guided, questions answered with honesty yet tempered with age-appropriate sensitivity. In doing so, her parents reinforced a foundation of trust, ensuring that Charlotte felt supported, heard, and empowered despite the surrounding turbulence. The implications of the situation extended beyond immediate interactions with Camilla and Gus Lopez. William recognized that Charlotte's social and emotional development could be subtly affected by prolonged exposure to orchestrated scenarios. Her relationships, decision-making processes, and understanding of trust could all be influenced by repeated instances of manipulation, even if these were executed with apparent benevolence. Thus, the proactive steps taken were both protective and preventative, designed to mitigate long-term consequences while addressing immediate concerns. As the story of Charlotte's predicament unfolded within the palace, staff members and advisors became acutely aware of the delicate nature of the situation. Every interaction involving the young princess was scrutinized, from casual playdates to official appearances. The objective was not to isolate her from normal experiences, but to ensure that these experiences remained authentic, voluntary, and aligned with her own interests rather than the ambitions of others. The palace's inner workings, long accustomed to balancing ceremonial duties with personal dynamics, were now mobilized in service of Charlotte's well-being. Charlotte's resilience, intelligence, and innate grace began to shine in this challenging environment. Even without full awareness of the political undercurrents, she displayed adaptability, empathy, and an emerging sense of self-determination. These qualities, cultivated through careful parenting and observation, became crucial in navigating the pressures imposed by external influences. Her parents' interventions were designed to reinforce these traits, providing a stable foundation upon which Charlotte could develop confidence, independence, and moral clarity. The tension between family loyalty and external manipulation reached its zenith as William prepared to confront Camilla. This was not merely a matter of protocol or title. It was a defining moment for Charlotte's future. The stakes were high. The potential for public scrutiny, familial discord, and long-term emotional impact all converged in this critical juncture. William's decision to act decisively reflected both his understanding of the palace's intricate dynamics and his unwavering commitment to his daughter. The outcome, though uncertain, was guided by principle, foresight, and the enduring bond between parent and child. In the end, Princess Charlotte's predicament was emblematic of the broader challenges faced by modern royalty. Even amidst wealth, privilege, and ceremonial grandeur, the vulnerability of a child to subtle manipulation remains a profound concern. Through careful planning, unwavering vigilance, and decisive intervention, William and Catherine sought not only to protect Charlotte from immediate influence, but also to instill in her a sense of agency, autonomy, and moral clarity that would serve her throughout her life. The confrontation with Camilla was not just a familial conflict. It was a defining moment in the preservation of trust, integrity, and the ethical exercise of authority within one of the world's most scrutinized institutions. The atmosphere inside the palace was electric with tension. Every corridor seemed charged, as though the walls themselves had absorbed the anxiety of those who walked within them. William had spent sleepless nights preparing for what was to come, knowing that confronting Camilla was not merely a family dispute. It was a decisive moment that would define the boundaries of influence, authority, and protection within the royal household. His mind was a whirlwind of strategy, anticipating every possible objection, every subtle deflection, every attempt Camilla might make to assert her presence over Princess Charlotte. The weight of responsibility pressed upon him, but beneath it lay an unwavering determination. His daughter's well-being could not be compromised. Camilla entered the room with a composed demeanor, the practiced elegance of someone accustomed to command and control. She had anticipated this meeting, of course. There were always signs, subtle hints that her influence might be questioned. But the reality of William's resolute stance was something she had not fully prepared for. His gaze, steady and unwavering, carried the gravity of a parent protecting their child, a force that no amount of protocol or royal decorum could counter. The room, adorned with centuries of history and symbols of monarchy, felt smaller somehow, the distance between authority and manipulation collapsing under the intensity of the confrontation. William began deliberately, his voice calm, yet imbued with a firmness that left no room for misinterpretation. He laid out the observations, the patterns of behavior, and the subtle ways in which Charlotte's interactions had been guided toward outcomes orchestrated by Camilla. There was no accusation rooted in anger, no embellishment or dramatization. It was a presentation of facts, meticulously compiled and framed with the clarity of purpose that only a protective parent could muster. Camilla listened, her expression composed but guarded, each word measured, each gesture calculated to maintain her composure while she processed the unprecedented challenge to her influence. As William spoke, the undercurrents of palace life became painfully apparent. Advisors, staff, and even distant relatives had long navigated the labyrinth of influence and obligation, where appearances often masked motivations. Yet this confrontation stripped away the subtlety, exposing the core of the conflict: the autonomy of Princess Charlotte and the ethical responsibility of those entrusted with her care. William's approach was deliberate, designed to prevent escalation while ensuring the seriousness of the situation was fully understood. Every pause, every phrase, was calibrated to convey that this was not a matter of pride or rivalry, but one of principle and protection. Camilla attempted to interject, her words polite, yet layered with the nuanced tactics of persuasion she had long mastered. She framed her actions as mentorship, as opportunities for Charlotte to expand her social awareness, and as benevolent gestures meant to cultivate refinement and poise. But William, unyielding, countered with evidence, examples, and observations that highlighted the pattern of manipulation, the subtle nudges toward decisions not fully guided by the child's own judgment. Each counterpoint chipped away at the veneer of intent, revealing the reality that the interactions, though outwardly cordial, were strategically positioned to extend influence over Charlotte. The tension in the room was almost palpable. Camilla, known for her poise and composure in public and private, was confronted with an unflinching force she had not anticipated. William's insistence was rooted not in confrontation for its own sake, but in the imperative of safeguarding Charlotte. The stakes were higher than family discord. They encompassed the child's emotional autonomy, her perception of trust, and the precedent set for future interactions. Every word William spoke was a careful articulation of boundaries, ethics, and the non-negotiable priority of Charlotte's welfare. As the dialogue unfolded, it became clear that this was a turning point. William's decisiveness left no ambiguity. Camilla's influence over Charlotte in these matters was to be curtailed immediately. The room, historically a place of quiet negotiation and ceremonial deference, was transformed into a crucible of accountability. The implications were far-reaching. Not only was Charlotte's immediate environment being safeguarded, but the message reverberated throughout the palace that manipulation, even under the guise of benevolence, would not be tolerated when a child's agency was at stake. Charlotte, though not physically present, was at the center of every decision, every argument, every measured statement. Her voice, her autonomy, and her capacity to navigate the world freely were the anchors around which William structured his approach. The confrontation was not about power for its own sake, but about asserting the primacy of parental responsibility and ethical stewardship within the intricate dynamics of royalty. Every tactic, every assertion, was carefully measured to protect the child while maintaining the dignity and decorum demanded by the palace setting. Camilla's response, while measured, betrayed the first hints of frustration and realization. She had long relied on subtlety, on the careful orchestration of interactions that appeared innocuous to onlookers, yet carried profound implications. Facing William's unwavering scrutiny, her influence was exposed for what it was, an attempt to extend control under the pretense of guidance. The room, historically a space of ritual and etiquette, became a theater of ethical confrontation, with the child's welfare as the ultimate arbiter of right and wrong. The outcome of the confrontation was decisive. William established clear boundaries, outlining the scope of acceptable interactions and emphasizing that any future engagement with Charlotte must prioritize her autonomy, her preferences, and her emotional well-being above all else. Camilla, confronted with the impossibility of circumventing these boundaries, recognized the limits of her influence. While the encounter was fraught with tension, it was also a defining moment of clarity and accountability. The protection of Charlotte had been asserted, and the precedence of ethical parenting over subtle manipulation had been firmly established. As the meeting concluded, the air of tension slowly dissipated, leaving behind a sense of resolution tempered with the awareness that family dynamics, particularly within royalty, are never static. William's decisive action sent ripples through the palace, signaling that the autonomy of the next generation would be protected with vigilance, foresight, and unwavering moral clarity. Charlotte's place within her family, though still influenced by the complex interplay of tradition and expectation, was now safeguarded against undue manipulation, ensuring that her growth, her decisions, and her sense of self would remain guided by love, integrity, and principled oversight. This confrontation marked the beginning of a new chapter, one in which Charlotte's welfare was explicitly prioritized, where boundaries were clearly defined, and where the ethical stewardship of influence within the royal family was reaffirmed. The lessons imparted in this moment about vigilance, integrity, and the moral imperative to protect the vulnerable would resonate far beyond the confines of the palace walls, shaping not only Charlotte's development but also the future approach of those entrusted with her care. The consequences of the confrontation between William and Camilla rippled immediately through the palace, reaching far beyond the walls of the room where the discussion had taken place. Rumors, whispers, and subtle glances began circulating among the staff, advisors, and even distant relatives. What had been a carefully contained disagreement had now become a precedent, a clear signal that parental authority, especially when it came to Princess Charlotte, could not be undermined by manipulation or influence disguised as mentorship. The palace, which had long thrived on tradition, hierarchy, and unspoken agreements, was suddenly forced to acknowledge a new order where ethical oversight and the well-being of the younger generation trumped political maneuvering. William emerged from the meeting with a quiet, determined resolve. Unlike confrontations fueled by anger or resentment, his approach had been deliberate, precise, and unwavering. He knew that the fallout would not be limited to immediate conversations. This decision would trigger reactions across multiple spheres: the extended family, public perception, and even the media. There were advisors to brief, protocols to adjust, and careful considerations of how the news would eventually be interpreted outside the palace walls. His mind was racing, cataloging every possible consequence, weighing the importance of Charlotte's autonomy against the inevitable tension that would arise from Camilla's curtailed influence. Camilla, in contrast, retreated into a private space to process the outcome. Though her public composure remained intact, privately, she was grappling with an unexpected defeat. Years of careful cultivation of influence, meticulous planning, and strategic interventions had been disrupted in a single, decisive confrontation. The subtle control she had exercised over Charlotte, intended to shape perceptions and outcomes in her favor, had been explicitly limited. It was a moment of reckoning, a realization that no amount of royal protocol, charm, or manipulation could override the moral authority of a parent committed to protecting their child. The fallout extended to Charlotte herself, though indirectly. The child was spared the details of the confrontation, shielded from the adult complexities that had unfolded behind closed doors. Yet the effects were evident in the shifting dynamics around her. Advisors and staff who had previously deferred to Camilla's subtle guidance were now more attuned to William's directives. Her environment, once influenced by competing agendas, began to align with her father's commitment to prioritizing her autonomy and well-being. Even small routines, the way she spent her afternoons, the choices presented to her, and the freedom to express her opinions, reflected a subtle yet profound change in the power structure surrounding her. The palace itself seemed to respond to the tension. Meetings that had previously been perfunctory now carried an undercurrent of caution, as if everyone understood that the balance of influence had shifted. Those who had relied on Camilla's favor now had to navigate a new reality, where decisions would be measured against the standard of Charlotte's welfare rather than loyalty or traditional hierarchies. Advisors began re-evaluating their roles, questioning whether deference to Camilla's wishes had ever been justified, and considering how to adapt to a system where the child's interests were paramount. Public perception, though initially unaware of the intricacies, began to sense that a significant change had occurred within the royal family. Subtle shifts in behavior, Charlotte appearing more confident and autonomous in public engagements, William's visible protectiveness during events, and Camilla's more restrained interactions, were noted by observers and commentators alike. Analysts speculated, debated, and dissected every gesture, attempting to understand the underlying dynamics. The narrative that emerged in the media, whether accurate or speculative, underscored a crucial truth. The protection of a child's agency and autonomy could redefine even centuries-old institutions. The decision also set a legal and procedural precedent. While the monarchy operates with both tradition and discretion, William's intervention demonstrated that parental authority could not be undermined, even within the rigid protocols of royalty. Advisors and legal experts began reviewing the implications, considering how future interactions with young members of the royal family might need to be structured to ensure ethical compliance. This extended beyond Charlotte. The action signaled to all members of the household and extended family that boundaries, particularly those concerning minors, would be respected, enforced, and non-negotiable. Camilla's inner circle felt the immediate repercussions. Staff members who had previously facilitated her influence over Charlotte were now placed in positions where their loyalties were tested. Some quietly resigned, unwilling to navigate the shifting power dynamics, while others attempted to adapt, demonstrating allegiance to William's direct. The reconfiguration of trust, influence, and authority created an undercurrent of tension that persisted for weeks, subtly reshaping the palace's social and operational framework. Within the family, private discussions unfolded in hushed tones, revealing a spectrum of opinions. Some expressed support for William's decisive action, recognizing the ethical imperative of safeguarding Charlotte's autonomy. Others, more aligned with traditional notions of influence and hierarchy, questioned whether the confrontation might fracture relationships irreparably. Nevertheless, the outcome was unequivocal. The precedents of ethical oversight and parental authority over manipulation or control had been established, marking a historic moment in the ongoing evolution of the monarchy's internal dynamics. In the days following the confrontation, William took deliberate steps to reinforce the boundaries he had set. Charlotte's schedule was adjusted to prioritize her own choices. Her engagements were designed to foster independence and self-expression, and interactions with Camilla were carefully monitored to ensure they remained appropriate and supportive rather than directive. These measures were subtle yet profound, reshaping the environment around Charlotte to reflect principles of autonomy, ethical stewardship, and responsible influence. Meanwhile, Camilla faced a complex psychological landscape. Her public composure masked private frustration, introspection, and a recalibration of strategy. Though she could no longer exert the same level of influence over Charlotte, she began exploring alternative avenues to maintain her relevance and position within the family. The tension between ambition and restraint, authority and accountability, created a delicate balance that required careful navigation, a challenge she had not anticipated when her influence was suddenly curtailed. The ripple effects extended even further, touching advisors, extended family, staff, and public perception. The palace's internal culture began to shift, emphasizing ethical oversight and prioritization of the younger generation's autonomy. Protocols were reevaluated, routines were subtly restructured, and the dynamics of influence were scrutinized with a newfound ethical lens. What had once been a space where subtle power plays could flourish without accountability now became a carefully monitored environment, governed by clear standards of conduct and responsibility. Ultimately, the fallout from the confrontation underscored a profound truth. Protecting the autonomy and well-being of the next generation requires courage, decisiveness, and an unwavering commitment to ethical principles. William's actions sent a clear message that manipulation, even when cloaked in mentorship or benevolence, would not be tolerated when it threatened the agency of a child. The palace, its inhabitants, and the public were now witnesses to a historic moment that redefined the interplay of authority, influence, and responsibility within one of the world's most scrutinized families. The air within the palace grew tense as whispers began circulating about the inevitable formal decision regarding Camilla's role. What had started as a private confrontation between William and Camilla had now reached the stage where protocol demanded official action. Advisors and legal experts were summoned to provide counsel, carefully reviewing centuries of royal precedent, the nuances of constitutional guidance, and the personal stakes at play. The gravity of the situation was unprecedented. While the monarchy had navigated scandals, disputes, and public controversies before, the prospect of stripping a queen consort of her title represented a historic rupture, an action both symbolic and practical. carrying implications that would reverberate through the royal household and across the Commonwealth. William, fully aware of the weight of his decision, approached the matter with meticulous preparation. He consulted with constitutional scholars, private legal advisors, and trusted family members to ensure that every step would be unassailable. It was not a matter to be decided hastily or out of anger. The integrity of the monarchy, the welfare of Princess Charlotte, and the preservation of public trust were all intertwined. Every document drafted, every meeting held, every statement considered was scrutinized for its potential impact. William understood that this was a turning point, a moment that could define his legacy as a leader and protector of his family, and he was determined to navigate it with precision. The formal declaration was drafted with careful language, balancing legal authority, historical precedent, and a tone that conveyed both gravity and necessity. The decision articulated that Camilla's influence, once extensive and often unchallenged, had crossed a threshold by attempting to direct the upbringing of Princess Charlotte in ways that conflicted with William's role as her primary guardian. While the declaration did not seek to undermine Camilla personally, it made clear that her title as queen consort could no longer carry the practical authority it had previously implied. In essence, the move acknowledged her past contributions while firmly restricting her capacity to shape the life of the heir in a manner inconsistent with parental oversight. Communicating the decision required strategic coordination. The palace's communications team was briefed extensively, ensuring that the announcement would reach the public with clarity and without unnecessary sensationalism. Internal channels were activated first. Senior staff, advisors, and members of the extended royal family were informed in a controlled environment, emphasizing the rationale, legal basis, and ethical considerations underpinning the move. Transparency within the institution was essential, particularly to prevent misinterpretation, speculation, or leaks that could exacerbate tensions. Camilla herself was informed through a private audience, conducted with both formality and discretion. William approached the conversation with a balance of firmness and respect, articulating the reasons for the action while acknowledging her contributions to the family and monarchy. The exchange was measured. It was not a confrontation, but rather the conveyance of a consequential decision. Camilla listened, her composure unwavering on the surface, though internally she wrestled with disappointment, frustration, and the sudden recalibration of her role. For the first time, the limits of her influence were laid bare, marking a decisive shift in the dynamics of the royal household. The ripple effect of the formal decision extended to the advisors and household staff. Those who had facilitated Camilla's prior involvement with Princess Charlotte were now instructed on new boundaries and responsibilities. Protocols were adjusted to ensure that Charlotte's autonomy remained protected, her engagements and daily activities monitored for adherence to William's directives. Staff members, accustomed to navigating a web of influence and expectation, now had a clear hierarchy and ethical framework guiding their actions. Compliance was no longer optional. It was mandatory to uphold the principles established by William's decisive intervention. Beyond the palace walls, the news of the formal action began to circulate, though initially in limited channels. Trusted media contacts, royal correspondents, and select commentators were provided with verified information under embargo, allowing them to prepare accurate reporting and analysis. The narrative emphasized that the decision was rooted in ethical responsibility, parental authority, and the well-being of Princess Charlotte, rather than personal animosity or political maneuvering. It was a story of accountability, illustrating that even long-standing traditions could be re-evaluated when they conflicted with moral and familial obligations. Public perception was carefully managed, balancing transparency with sensitivity. The monarchy, long aware of the intense scrutiny it faces, understood that every statement, image, and gesture would be analyzed. Official photographs, carefully staged meetings, and public engagements were orchestrated to reflect the stability of the family, the prudence of the decision, and the centrality of Princess Charlotte's welfare. William's public demeanor was deliberate, confident yet composed, protective yet measured, conveying authority without arrogance. Camilla, meanwhile, maintained a dignified presence, signaling grace under pressure while navigating the new limitations imposed on her influence. The formal stripping of Camilla's title as queen consort carried symbolic weight beyond its immediate practical consequences. It signaled a redefining of power within the royal household, establishing that ethical oversight, parental authority, and the protection of younger generations take precedence over protocol, tradition, or personal ambition. Historians and commentators recognize the moment as potentially transformative, a precedent that could influence future interactions among senior members of the royal family. By taking this step, William demonstrated a willingness to challenge precedent in the interest of ethical governance, setting a standard for accountability that extended far beyond a single individual or title. The decision also prompted private reflections among family members and close confidants. Some expressed admiration for William's resolve, acknowledging the difficulty of taking such a consequential step while maintaining public composure. Others grappled with questions about loyalty, influence, and the evolving nature of authority within a modern monarchy. These private reflections, though rarely visible to the public, underscored the profound significance of the formal decision, highlighting the delicate interplay of tradition, personal relationships, and ethical responsibility that defines life within the royal household. In the weeks following the announcement, the palace observed subtle yet meaningful changes. Camilla's interactions with Charlotte became guided by new protocols, emphasizing mentorship without authority. Advisors recalibrated their roles, focusing on support rather than direction. Charlotte, protected from manipulation and given increased autonomy, began to demonstrate confidence, curiosity, and self-expression in ways that had previously been constrained. The shift, though gradual, was unmistakable. A new era of accountability, ethical oversight, and child-centered governance had begun within the royal family. The formal decision was more than a title adjustment. It was a statement about values, priorities, and the responsibilities of those entrusted with influence over the next generation. William's action established a precedent that reinforced ethical conduct, parental authority, and the protection of autonomy, sending a clear message that manipulation, even when veiled as mentorship, would not be tolerated. The monarchy, ever conscious of its public image, had demonstrated that principled decisions could be made even amidst complex familial and institutional dynamics. The moment William's formal decision to strip Camilla of her title as queen consort became known internally, the palace was plunged into a whirlwind of reactions, emotions, and strategic recalibrations. Senior staff, advisors, and family members all grappled with the unprecedented nature of the move. While some quietly applauded the firmness of William's action, others wrestled with disbelief, concern, and the realization that centuries of tradition had been disrupted in a single decisive step. The palace corridors, typically echoing with the calm rhythm of protocol and ceremony, now vibrated with whispers, speculation, and urgent conversations. Every footstep, every murmur, carried the weight of what had just unfolded. The senior advisors convened immediately, forming a series of emergency meetings to assess the implications of the decision and how it would be interpreted both internally and publicly. The challenge was multifaceted. On one hand, there was the need to support William's authority and reinforce the legitimacy of his decision. On the other, there was a necessity to manage potential fallout among staff, family members, and the broader royal network. Discussions ranged from protocol adjustments to communication strategies, with advisors meticulously analyzing every word, gesture, and message that could either bolster or undermine the action taken. They were acutely aware that any misstep could ignite further controversy, media speculation, or familial discord. Within the private family circle, reactions were equally complex. Prince Charles, though careful not to publicly contest the decision, expressed a mixture of resignation and concern behind closed doors. He understood the rationale for William's intervention, especially regarding Charlotte's protection, yet there was an unmistakable tension in the air, a quiet acknowledgement of the historical weight of what had been done. The extended family, hearing through trusted intermediaries, reacted with a blend of curiosity and apprehension. Some sympathized with William's resolve, recognizing the necessity of prioritizing Charlotte's welfare over tradition or titles. Others, however, feared that the move might set a precedent that could destabilize existing hierarchies and influence dynamics within the royal household. Camilla's inner circle experienced a storm of uncertainty and speculation. Advisors who had previously facilitated her influence over Charlotte now faced a recalibration of their roles. Loyalty, previously expressed through deference to her guidance, was now challenged by William's direct oversight. Many staff members felt torn between personal allegiance and professional obligation. They navigated a delicate balancing act, respecting the authority of the queen consort while simultaneously adhering to the directives of the future king. This duality created tension, subtle resistance, and the need for careful diplomacy. Each interaction, each decision, became a test of judgment, discretion, and loyalty. Camilla herself, though outwardly composed, was not immune to the internal storm. Privately, she grappled with feelings of frustration, disappointment, and a sense of marginalization. The loss of her title was more than symbolic. It represented a recalibration of influence that had long been assumed. She engaged in extensive reflection, consulting with confidants and advisors to determine the best path forward. The conversations were strategic, aimed at preserving dignity, maintaining relationships, and exploring avenues for continued participation in family and public life, albeit within the constraints now imposed by William's decisive intervention. The reactions extended beyond immediate family and advisors to the extended network of palace staff, from household managers to ceremonial officers. Staff meetings were convened to clarify new protocols, redefine reporting lines, and establish boundaries in Charlotte's upbringing. These meetings were meticulously planned, ensuring that everyone understood both the rationale and the expectations behind William's decision. The emphasis was on creating a consistent, unified approach that safeguarded Charlotte's well-being, reinforced ethical standards, and minimized the potential for internal conflict. The staff, acutely aware of the stakes, approached these adjustments with a mixture of respect, apprehension, and careful attention to the nuances of their roles. Historical scholars and royal historians within the palace were also engaged, consulted to provide context and perspective. They traced precedents for similar interventions, analyzing centuries of royal conduct and succession practices. While the stripping of a queen consort's title had no direct historical analog in modern times, parallels were drawn from instances where monarchs or heirs had intervened decisively to protect younger members of the family or to correct abuses of influence. These consultations provided William and his advisors with a framework for understanding the broader implications of the decision, reinforcing the sense that, while unprecedented, the action was rooted in principles of responsibility, accountability, and ethical governance. The emotional landscape within the palace was complex. Staff and family members reported mixed feelings of anxiety, admiration, and tension. Some expressed private relief that a decisive figure had stepped forward to protect Charlotte, ensuring that her upbringing would remain guided by ethical oversight rather than personal ambition. Others worried about potential long-term consequences for familial relationships, public perception, and institutional stability. The emotional climate was carefully managed through private briefings, discreet counseling, and reinforcement of professional protocols. Maintaining equilibrium was paramount. The palace recognized that any visible signs of discord could amplify public speculation and media scrutiny. Meanwhile, Princess Charlotte, though shielded from the immediate awareness of palace politics, was subtly influenced by the new dynamics. Her interactions with Camilla became more structured, focusing on mentorship, education, and guidance rather than authority or influence. Charlotte's confidence and autonomy grew within this environment, as William and his advisors ensured that she had both protection and freedom to express herself. Observers noted a shift in her demeanor, a sense of self-assuredness, curiosity, and emerging independence that reflected the careful balance of oversight and empowerment. These changes, though gradual, were tangible indicators of the decision's impact on the daily life of the heir. The palace also monitored reactions among broader family networks and allied institutions, including Commonwealth representatives and diplomatic channels. Communication strategies were implemented to reassure stakeholders that the decision was taken in the interest of ethical governance, child protection, and institutional integrity. Public messaging, though controlled and measured, emphasized that the monarchy remained stable, principled, and responsive to contemporary expectations of accountability. The careful orchestration of these communications helped mitigate speculation and maintain confidence in both William's leadership and the monarchy's ability to navigate unprecedented challenges. The immediate aftermath of the formal decision and its internal reactions marked a turning point in the palace. The balance of power, influence, and authority had shifted decisively. William's intervention was not merely an administrative act. It was a demonstration of leadership, ethical judgment, and commitment to the welfare of the next generation. The ripple effects extended across family dynamics, staff responsibilities, historical precedent, and public perception, shaping a new era within the royal household. Each individual, from senior advisors to household staff, experienced the consequences in real time, navigating a complex interplay of emotion, protocol, and duty. By the end of the initial weeks following the decision, the palace had settled into a cautious equilibrium. Camilla adjusted to her redefined role, staff operated within clarified parameters, and Charlotte's daily life reflected the protective oversight intended by William's intervention. While whispers and speculation persisted, the internal structure stabilized, laying the groundwork for the monarchy to move forward with renewed clarity of purpose and ethical direction. The reactions within the palace, though varied and emotionally charged, ultimately